Good morning. Buenos dias. Thank you for having me and giving me this chance to speak to you briefly, I promise, about the skill sets that are going to be needed for publishing to thrive and even to survive. I call them other people's skill sets, and they are the cost of staying competitive. As editor-in-chief of Publishing Perspectives, which is the news medium of Frankfurter Buchmesse, I bring you the greetings of Frankfurt. Hope to see you in October. I want to read to you a short passage of text that was first actually presented at Frankfurt in 2018. I quote, "What are the best ways to support tech-driven innovation in the cultural and creative sectors? These sectors are very good at communicating other people's messages and stories, but when it comes to articulating their own interests, their voice is surprisingly weak. This has a lot to do with fragmentation, as the majority of creative players are micro-entities." I love that phrase. But on top of that, the creative sectors are not yet united and often work in silos. That is a passage from an extensive European manifesto that was at Frankfurt in a press conference opening an innovation summit in 2018. Some of the organizations involved are ones you're familiar with, including Aldous Up, Federation of European Publishers. We've just listened to Enrique, who works with them very closely, of course, and FGSR, the foundation led by Luis Gonzalez, who, along with Fandes Jose Manuel Anta, is our generous host and organizer of Readmagine. The observations put across in that manifesto were prescient, and they bear on many of the points we'll be touching on today and tomorrow and Friday. Coming as I do, not from publishing, but from journalism, the surveillance sector, if you will, what I found remarkable in the character of book publishing is a great tendency to silo itself as an industry. Consider a lesson from the pandemic. Publishing people, after the initial scare, said, "You see, books will always triumph." This is because, of course, many of our world markets had boosted sales, although it would be determined that many of those greater sales were being made not to new readers, but to the same readers who read with more intensity, bought more books, read more books. Entertainment platforms such as Amazon, when I interviewed Owen Purcell in London, told us that film people watched more film, people who watched television consumed more television, music people listened to more music, the gamers did more gaming, and the readers did more reading. There was a quick and fond assumption among publishing people that long-form, immersive reading was undergoing a revival. The drivers, however, of course, were the conditions of the health emergency, not quite a natural renaissance. Michelle Cobb is with us today, I'm glad to say, from the Audio Publishers Association. And one of the most telling points that her organization was picking up in its consumer behavior surveys was that people in the pandemic reported being soothed by listening to audiobooks. It was actually quite touching. I started listening to them far more myself as I tried to keep myself moving and my weight under control. As a diet, listening to a lot of audiobooks was a huge failure. And I'm going to need to talk to Michelle about that later today, too. But we must remember that audiobooks are on their own sales growth trajectory in many of the markets that we watch. And especially you will hear from Dos Doces Javier Celaya today about this. In the States, Michelle's group, where it's based, has just announced that in 2022, audiobooks saw double-digit growth for the 11th year. But in that increasingly weakened tradition of long-form, immersive, sit-still and read category, book sales in some markets, even if still above pre-coronavirus levels, right, are on a slow glide path downward. The intensity we saw in pandemica is subsiding. Even as consumer analysts are telling us that the buying public today wants to purchase experiences more than goods. You and I know the experience of books. For me, It's the extraordinary intimacy I feel with an author in my head that makes the experience sing. But others see books as goods, not services, not experiences. So let's talk about other people's skill sets that might help book publishing navigate the future. Which publishing houses you know have a film or television producer on their acquisition team? How many book cover designers are working with videographers or cinematographers? Speaking of audio and of Michelle's organization, where is your shop in terms of rapidly improving quality of automated audiobook readings? Is your backlist listenable yet? You can do that very inexpensively with artificial voices, and some of them are uncannily good already. For that matter, are those authors in those publishing houses sitting with comics writers to talk about what brevity really means? And are there developmental editors who are sitting with comics writers discussing what show don't tell really means? With your kind patience, I'd like to raise another couple of points. These are cultural concerns on which publishing should be out front, but appears to be hanging out on the back porch of its silo instead. Do you know the skill sets that came into play when the women's movement helped publishing a decade or so ago to begin compassionately and absolutely rightly create empowering and eloquent literature for girls and women? The industry has got so much to be proud of in terms of how generously and steadfastly it has worked to support, console, cheer on, and uplift women and girls. And what about boys? The boys are not all right. Did you know that the biggest killer of young men in the UK under 45 is suicide? Did you know that women are taking university degrees in some markets at a rate of almost 2 to 1 over guys? Did you know that, in fact, many colleges and universities are quietly operating a kind of de facto affirmative action to get more men onto those campuses? Not least because all of these brilliant, successful women would like to meet their male counterparts, right? This brings to us such an important point, and it's been captured by the Brookings Institution's senior fellow named Richard Reeves in his book called Of Boys and Men. Here is one rather practical way to frame the question that's now upon us in publishing's purview. Do our increasingly brilliant and accomplished women and girls want to live in a world of more and more often failing, floundering, bewildered, and depressed guys who don't even read? Do you want to live in that world? Here's the opportunity. Quarto Publishing Group is working on a book called She Can STEM. This is fantastic. It's a book about great women in science and technology. Terrific stuff. At the same time, after reading Richard Reeves' book, they're starting to develop a book called He Can Heal. HEAL, H-E-A-L, stands for, let me get it right, health, educational, administrative, and literary, that's us, professions. In some markets now, the business of publishing, the book business, is 80% female. Does book publishing really want to leave male money on the table? Or isn't it time to work with leaders in feminism to learn how to respond to the crisis of boys and men? Then, here's another one for you in the cultural field, although we think it's in another field. I'm going to say it, brace yourself, AI, yes. I've asked Louise to schedule a conference-wide panic at 3 p.m. this afternoon. We'll all feel much better after that. As with enhanced ebooks, virtual reality, augmented reality, all of which were going to kill the publishing star. You'll remember that time, right? We could spend our time together in collegial, chaotic concern about AI, or as Luis and Jose have actually worked out more helpfully. We can hear today Christoph Blasi. You have to hear him. There is a rational understanding there coming to you. You will feel much better even than after the conference-wide panic. He knows what's there, and he knows what you need to know. So make sure you hear him. In a recent article, the consultant, Thad McElroy, some of you know Thad, has written that AI is going to enable books to morph into additional revenue-producing media in ways we've never seen before. His mouth to God's ear, right? This is important because McElroy points out that film gaming, music, social media, and I'm quoting him now, are more important to most adults than reading. Time use studies show adults spending less than 5% of their leisure time reading and an ever-increasing percentage of their time gaming and watching videos online. This is why McElroy is telling publishers, don't take your eyes off the entertainment sectors, because AI is impacting them too. So in the silo, how well developed are publishing's relations with cultural and creative institutions that can help contextualize, support, and even market the evolving mission of the book business and its people? One thing is to look for institutions with which you can align yourself and even publish yourself. The International Publishers Association has formed a terrific liaison with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals team, and that widening collaboration can help publishers who want to be what some of us call climate storytellers. The job in that case for publishers becomes not just to get their own houses in order in terms of climate responsibility, but also to tell the stories that the readers need to be hearing to understand what's ahead. It may be the greatest story on earth. It may even be the one about the earth. As we all move through Readmagine's fine programming together, I want to encourage you to think about the institutions you know, the ones you've worked with, the ones you like to donate to, the ones you feel closest to their mission, and start thinking, where could you begin to start floating each other's boats if you actually made formal agreements and created content together? This is a huge area that has not been explored by as many publishers as I wish we'd seen so far. When you're listening to everyone today, look for what you don't know. Listen for ideas and values from other people's silos, other people's skill sets. Karl Popper, the Viennese philosopher, said, "Our knowledge can only be finite, while our ignorance must necessarily be infinite." No matter how good publishing is at what it does, it needs to know what its cultural and creative cousins are doing, and thus how to work with them. The founder of Habitat Humanity, his name is Millard Fuller, he said, "It is easier to act yourself into a new way of thinking than to think yourself into a new way of acting." Today in my industry, journalism, the generalist is actually valued much more keenly than the specialist, because in this stormy world of polyglot issues, we need fluency in economics, politics, science, medicine, law, education. And I wish for publishing as an industry the same reevaluation of what the high view offers: more actionable thoughts about what's possible, more knowledge and less ignorance about the nearby industries, a higher drone's eye view of the cultural as well as the creative landscape, and a sense for the experiences that can give consumers the imaginative blessings of reading without a dogged alliance to one format or another. The pathway to all of this is by exploring other people's skill sets, coming back with new tools, and finding the courage and the willingness to innovate with them. Thank you so much.